At some point in almost every divorce, there's a moment where someone hands you a name. A friend mentions her cousin's law firm, a colleague whispers the name of the lawyer that destroyed his ex, and your therapist says she knows someone good, and you feel briefly like you're doing something. I'm Iman Ibrahim. I spent 19 years as a family lawyer in Singapore and in England, and this is Divorce Actually, where we talk about what actually helps when you don't need more legal advice or more emotional processing. The decision making, preparation, communication, and negotiation frameworks that actually move you forward. Today, we are going to talk about what actually goes into choosing the right lawyer for your situation, because sometimes that name from a friend approach works, and at other times it fails expensively. And the difference is almost never about the lawyer's reputation. It's about whether you knew what you needed before you hired. So, even as a lawyer, and even more so now as a divorce coach, I have met so many people who told me they don't like their lawyer. I've met people who told me they've changed lawyer more than once. And I've definitely also met people who told me they felt they spent too much on lawyers. Some people up to 7 figures. That's a lot of money. It's probably also a lot of time and energy and all of those things that you maybe don't want to be spending. So the choice of lawyer is very important. But why do so many people end up with the wrong lawyer? So the most common mistake is hiring urgently without clarity on what you're actually hiring that lawyer to do for you. And this is fair. People in crisis default to maybe the most impressive sounding option, or the lawyer with the most aggressive reputation, or whoever got most recommended most recently. Those are ways of choosing your lawyer, but I'm going to say that they're not necessarily useful filters for your specific situation. For example, the lawyer who was right for your colleague's high conflict, high contest divorce may be entirely wrong for yours. Different lawyers are built for different conflict profiles, and we will get to what that means shortly. But choosing the wrong lawyer for your circumstances costs you in real terms: money, time, relationships, outcomes. So the first step is not finding a name. It's about being honest about what kind of conflict you're actually in. Side note, sorry if you came here to get a lawyer recommendation. I am asked all the time for lawyer recommendations, and I really either don't give them or I give it very, very grudgingly depending on who's asking. And I know why you're asking me. I understand. It feels direct, a great shortcut, because you are overwhelmed or you know someone overwhelmed and you need someone good. And you trust me. Thank you so much. You trust me enough to ask me to just give you a name. And the reason why I don't do it is not because I don't know good lawyers. Of course, after all the time that I've spent in family law, I know plenty of lawyers. The first reason is simple. I don't know what you think is a good lawyer. I don't know what you need in a person. And so a lawyer that I may think is exceptional might have a communication style that makes you, the client, feel unheard. Or I might know a lawyer who is very methodical and very thorough, but that might feel too slow for someone who likes to have a lot of momentum to function. Alternatively, a lawyer who is very direct and unemotive could be what one client needs, and it could be completely destabilizing for another. And I say this with all seriousness. I have seen a client paired with a very unemotional lawyer, and they cried. The client cried, begged to be given a different lawyer. So personal fit is real. How can I assess that if I don't know you? And how can I make the right recommendation for you? The second reason, which I'm going to say matters actually even more than the first one, and people do not see this one coming, that even a good lawyer cannot work with bad instructions. This is the part that gets missed because nobody thinks about how they are instructing their lawyer. People assume if you hire someone competent, competence will carry the day. But your lawyer can only work with what you give them. If you arrive unclear on what you want, they will default to fighting for everything that's available because that's their job in the absence of any other direction. And if you send emotionally driven instructions in the middle of a bad night, they will respond to those instructions. That's what they're supposed to do. But that might be you just being very emotional in that moment. It might be that you then chop and changed your position because your ex was doing something to provoke you, and then your legal strategy had to shift because of that. So a great lawyer and a poorly prepared client is not a good outcome. It's an expensive one. So the truth is, when people ask me for a name, I usually say, I'm sorry, I don't know you well enough, and I won't know whether you think it's a good lawyer. But what I really want to say is, can we make sure that you are ready to use a lawyer well? Because the recommendation part is not that tough, but knowing what you need, knowing how to instruct your lawyer well, and knowing how to show up to that lawyer-client relationship as a strategic participant, that's what determines whether you get value from whoever you hire, and that's what this episode is actually about. So let's start at the very beginning. Does divorce or separation always mean hiring a lawyer? And are there situations where another process makes more sense? So the assumption is, of course, that divorce equals lawyer. And that's a fair assumption. Divorce is a legal process. You're going from legally married to legally divorced. And certainly you have to file papers to get that outcome. But I will say that within that, there are 3 processes that I see. Number 1, negotiation. And negotiation can happen party to party, so between the spouses, or it can happen lawyer to lawyer. That's one part. Then you've got the other part, which we all know of well, which is litigation. And I'm going to say that there is a third part, which is mediation. Sometimes that is the unsung hero, because a lot of divorces don't go the whole 9 yards all the way to a full-on hearing in court. So many people don't need to be in this adversarial legal process at all. Mediation is worth understanding properly. It's not a soft option or something you do when you can't really afford lawyers. It's actually a structured negotiation process with a neutral third party facilitating you. And from where I sit as a mediator, it is for couples who have real disagreements, but they operate in good faith. And in those circumstances, it can produce a faster, cheaper, and better outcome than litigation. There is also collaborative divorce. I mean, since we're here, let's talk about that as well. And that's where each party has a lawyer, but everyone is committed to resolving things without going to court. And these are lawyers who are specifically trained for it. So if you are thinking that this is a route you want to go, look out specifically for collaborative family lawyers. And again, this only works if both sides genuinely mean it. The question of which process suits you comes back to your conflict profile, which we're about to get into. Example: if your ex will not disclose assets honestly, well, what is the point of mediation then? You need legal mechanisms to compel disclosure. And if it's a situation where there are safety concerns, you need protective legal measures first. But if the conflict is high emotion rather than high stakes, there may be a faster path than going on with full litigious adversarial proceedings. Now, a lawyer is still often involved in non-litigated processes. They do the reviewing of documents, reviewing your agreements, advising you on your position, ensuring that what you are agreeing to is sound. At least I sincerely hope that they are doing that. Not gonna lie, I have seen consent orders, which means they were drafted by lawyers and consented to by both parties, that don't make any sense and were not sound. There is a difference between a lawyer who is your strategic advisor and a lawyer who is your fighter, your warrior, and your champion. Sometimes they can be both, but not everyone is. Most people are not. So know which one you need, then you know which one you're looking for. What is a conflict profile and how do you figure out yours? Well, your conflict profile is a read on two things: the nature of your dispute and the operating style of the other party. On the nature of the dispute, is the disagreement about the legal issues, what you're entitled to, what the arrangement should be, or is it primarily emotional? Now, both can present themselves as a legal conflict, but they require different responses. A legal dispute has specific contested issues where each side has a position, and resolution means finding a number or an arrangement that both parties can live with. An emotional dispute is one where one or both parties are using the legal process to extend conflict, seek acknowledgement or validation, or avoid finality. And these are not the same thing. Legal process is a very, very expensive container for an emotional issue. On the operating style of the other party, or even on your own operating style, are you or are they going to engage in a good faith process? Or, now be honest here, are you or they going to use any opening, any concession as an invitation to escalate things? This is perhaps the single most important variable in deciding what process and what type of lawyer suits you. A party who is difficult but fundamentally reasonable, who will respond, maybe eventually respond, to clear, firm boundaries and a structured process can be worked with in mediation or negotiation, but someone who is genuinely bad faith, who withholds, who fabricates, who weaponizes, requires a different set of legal tools. A lot of people overestimate or underestimate which category they or their ex is in when they're in the middle of it. And it's fair because the emotional intensity feels like evidence of bad faith. It often isn't, and that assessment matters a lot for what you're going to spend and how long this takes. What are the types of family lawyers and how do they differ? Now, I'm not talking about junior, middle, or senior lawyers here. I think that's too obvious and I don't need to touch on it. I'm really talking about three broad types. And I will say that most law practices have a blend of these. So it's not about one law firm being better than another. Number one, the most obvious one you have is your litigator. This is a lawyer built for contested matters going to court. They are so comfortable with adversarial processes. They are experienced with evidence. They know how to build a case. This is the right person if your dispute is genuinely going to be decided by a judge at the end of it all, or if your situation involves serious non-disclosure, safety concerns, or someone who is simply not going to cooperate on any terms at all. This is not the right person most of the time if your matter is likely to settle and you want to settle it. For that type of case, you might want the second category, which is the collaborative or settlement-focused practitioner, and there definitely are a lot of those out there too. This is someone who is skilled in the negotiation architecture, who wants you to divorce intentionally, and they are focused on getting to a deal without going to court. This type of lawyer, I would say, is better for someone who needs to maintain a functional post-divorce relationship, looking at you co-parents. This is often far more cost effective, but of course, it does require you and the other side to be participating in good faith. If your ex will not cooperate in good faith, or you are not going to cooperate in good faith, be honest now. The settlement-focused approach will not protect you. Finally, the third category of lawyer, I will say, is the transactional or fixed fee practitioner. You will definitely see these if you Google for divorce lawyers. There are a lot of advertisements when you search about divorce for a low fee, for a fixed fee, for a net fee. You have seen them. This is appropriate for straightforward matters. Broadly, I would say that these are short marriages, limited to no assets, no children, and that the agreement is substantially already reached before they contact the lawyer. So it's very cost efficient. It is not appropriate where there is real complexity or dispute. So please don't kid yourself. The mistake is assuming that you know which category you're in without actually thinking it through. Many people assume that they need a litigator because the conflict feels extreme. But I remind you that conflict is often emotional, not legal. So whether, and you can quote me on this, whether you need court depends on facts, not feelings. Here's another question I'm often asked. Should you consult more than one lawyer when you're deciding who to go with? And I'm going to say yes. Yes, you should in most cases. Now, it's not because I'm asking you to go and hunt down the best quote. Not at all. I think that you should consult 2, maybe 3 lawyers before committing because, number one, it gives you a comparison point for the quality of advice. For example, if 2 experienced lawyers read your situation completely differently, that's important information for you to know. If they broadly agree, you may have more confidence in the direction that your case is going to go in. Secondly, it tells you something about fit that you're not going to learn by just meeting with one lawyer. You simply won't know. So, practically speaking, consult 2, maximum 3. More than that, and I'm going to call you out as gathering information rather than deciding which is a problem. Also, I think it's tiring, really. How can you go and interview, if you like, more than 3 people, retell your story, live it 3 or more times? It's a lot. It's tiring and overwhelming, and you can come back with more than you need to know. So pick wisely. You are not looking for a consensus, and you are not looking for the most optimistic reading of your situation. You are looking for the lawyer whose thinking you trust and whose approach fits what you actually need. So one thing to be aware of is that some lawyers will treat the initial consultation as a sales conversation. And to be fair, they're not wrong to do so because, of course, maintaining a successful practice means having clients, which means converting them in the first consultation. But you should know that that is happening and filter accordingly. The ones that are worth keeping are the ones who genuinely give you useful thinking to go on even before you have retained them as your lawyer. Also practical. Please go in with the same core questions to each lawyer so that you can compare apples and apples, not apples and oranges. If you download completely differently to each lawyer, you cannot compare their responses. Before your first consultation, what should you actually know, other than, of course, asking them the same questions? There are 3 things you need to be honest about before you walk in. First and very important, what is the outcome you are trying to achieve? Not in legal terms, in real life terms. Are you trying to finish this quickly? Are you trying to protect a particular asset or secure a particular arrangement in relation to your children? Are you trying to avoid court entirely? That's something that can be done. These are different priorities. They are different to everyone, and they lead to different legal strategies. If you can't articulate this, you are going to default into fight for everything, and fight for everything is not a strategy. Secondly, what is your actual conflict level? I'm not talking about the emotional intensity here, although I'm sure that there is. It is the legal complexity. Do you have significant contested assets? Do you have a serious disagreement about the children? And do you have a spouse who will not provide financial disclosure? Or is the situation difficult, but fundamentally could be resolved if the right process is used? Third, what is your capacity right now? And this is the emotional and even a financial question, because some people can sustain a 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe even more than that, years of contested process. Some cannot manage another 6 months of daily warfare. And that's fine. These people are not hiring the same type of lawyer. So you first need to come in with honest answers to these 3 questions, and that changes the complexion of your first consultation, because you don't want to just be downloading the story each time. Instead, you want to be having a strategic conversation. What should you be actually assessing in that first consultation? After 19 years, I can tell you that most people go into the first consultation hoping the lawyer is going to tell them what to do. That's so wrong. You are there to assess the fit. And do you really need the lawyer to tell you about the basics of divorce, which you can read up for yourself? I say this over and over again. You can read this up for yourself on the court website. If the way that the court website is displayed is not the most user-friendly, I accept it's not, then you can use AI to help you decipher it. Do you need a lawyer to do that for you? I'm going to say you don't. But anyway, even if you do, that's not what your first consultation is for. Your first consultation is for you to assess these 3 things. Number 1, are they listening to your situation? Or are they just fitting you into a pattern according to their usual approach? A good lawyer will hear your specific facts before drawing any kind of conclusion, and a red flag lawyer will immediately tell you what you're entitled to before they've gone into any real depth about the relationship, the assets, or the children arrangements. It's sort of a template response and not at all about your case. Secondly, do they explain your options, or do they just recommend one? Because in almost every divorce situation, there are multiple viable paths, and a good lawyer should explain those paths to you, including their respective costs, risks, and timelines. Then they can give you a recommendation. A lawyer who presents only one path as the singular way forward is either simplifying for efficiency or doesn't have the range to run the other approaches. So you sit with that for a second. And finally, do they answer? What do you do exactly? Now, I'm going to say this is a legitimate question, and you don't want a lawyer who deflects it because it feels evasive. You also don't really need a definitive answer. What you're actually listening for is the quality of their thinking, because obviously you want a lawyer who can think for you, and also whether they can be honest with you when maybe the honest answer is a little uncomfortable. Those questions are probably quite logical, and there are questions that people don't ask, but they should be asking. Most people, of course, will ask about experience and fees, and yes, okay, those are necessary things, but they don't always tell you about what you're going to get. Here are some other questions you can ask. What is your current bandwidth? How many active matters do you have running? And who handles the files when you are not available? A brilliant lawyer, no matter how brilliant, who is overcommitted, is a problem, because what if they don't have enough time for your case? Then ask who else in your team will be working on my matter. In larger firms especially, the person that you meet may not be the person doing all of the work. And that's not a problem, because to be fair, do we need a senior lawyer to be filling in some basic forms? Probably not. But you need to know this going in. You shouldn't be paying partner rates for associate work, and that is a conversation to have up front. You may also want to know how you're being charged when there are multiple lawyers in the room, because sometimes the partner will have an associate or a junior associate, someone of a different level. How are you being charged in that situation? Now, something to raise with your lawyers also, how do you prefer to communicate, and how do they respond? How quickly do they respond? I can tell you that communication style mismatches are one of the biggest sources of client dissatisfaction. Some people, some clients love to WhatsApp their lawyers, and their lawyers do not want to WhatsApp them back. They have their reasons, and that is fair. Some things are better done on email or phone calls. And there are some lawyers who only do their responses in a particular window of time, because like other people, they like to time block. So they might have a particular time of day where they answer as many emails as they can, and thereafter only the urgent ones get answered. There's nothing wrong with any of this, but you need to know whether it fits how you like to work under pressure. For example, I had a client who did not ever want to be contacted at the weekends. And as a lawyer, you know, there would be times when you can't fit in all your emails during the week and you need to send emails over the weekend. If your client lets you know this, then you can figure out for yourselves what works best. Maybe that is scheduling emails for the week only, but the client needs to understand that that might cause a time crunch of some other kind. So it also would depend on the urgency of what is going on. But talk about it, right? Not be shouting because you were not happy about how quick the response was. Another great question to ask is, what does a typical week on my case look like? And this will surface whether the lawyers have a structured approach to case management or whether they just respond reactively. Now, to be fair, again, lawyers are often fighting fires and they will be fighting the biggest or worst fire first, and yours may not be the worst one as much as you think it is. So, to be fair, it's often a hybrid approach. But what you don't want is the situation that is so chaotic and so disorganized that you are only getting the first draft of something the night before it needs to be filed. That is hugely problematic because are you going to drop everything to give a response in the middle of the night and then find time in the middle of your day at a rush to sign something off? It's not ideal. I mean, yes, it happens sometimes. If it happens every single time, is that really how you want to work? So let's talk about red flags. What are the red flags that people tend to miss? There are lawyers who escalate everything immediately. In the first meeting, they're already talking about court injunctions, aggressive discovery, aggressive approaches, and maybe your situation requires it, but if it doesn't, all this sort of immediate escalation signals someone who has only one mode, and it also signals expensive. Then you have the lawyer who never pushes back on what you want. They just say, yes, we can do that. Of course, we can do that. Anything you want, we can do that. A lawyer who agrees with everything you say in the first meeting could be just telling you what you want to hear in order to sign you up as a client. That's not legal advice. You need someone who will tell you when your position is legally weak and when your expectations are unrealistic or when what you want will cost more than what it's worth. A good lawyer pushes back, and you, as the good client, need to understand this. Another red flag would be the lawyer who seems uncomfortable with the other side. If you mention that your ex's lawyer is Mr. Big Shot so-and-so, and you see this reaction that reads as unease or deference, pay attention to it. You will always want someone who can work with and against difficult opposing counsel without it affecting them. Finally, red flag, the lawyer who can't talk about money, which means they are not very clear on their cost structures, they're extremely vague estimates, or resistance to discussing worst case billing scenarios. Those are red flag problems. Legal costs in contested divorces can move significantly, and a good lawyer is upfront about it, not defensive about it. So, since we're talking about fees, how should you think about fees and cost structures? There are three main structures. You've got hourly fees, hourly billing, and you've got fixed fees, which are the transactional package fees I talked about, and a hybrid of those both, which is like maybe fixed for certain stages and hourly for other elements. Hourly billing is standard. When I say hourly billing, lawyers are required to inform you of their hourly rate. How they bill may be in increments of 6 minutes. Some might do 1 or 2 minutes, and there are some who do increments of 20 minutes. That makes a difference because, for example, you're only having a 5-minute conversation, but as standard, it is billed as a 20-minute unit. So read your engagement letter and make sure you're clear on that before you sign up. Now, with hourly billing, sometimes costs are genuinely hard to predict because they depend heavily on how the other side behaves, right? You have to remember, you are not just paying for what your lawyer does, you are paying for every piece of unreasonable conduct by the opposing party that requires a response from you and your lawyer. So remember that. Fixed fee is appropriate, again, where I've talked before about the scope being very clearly defined. And yes, you get predictability. The limitation is, of course, if the matter becomes more complex, a good lawyer will revisit the fee. That's fair. And a fixed fee that never moves regardless of scope is kind of an interesting one. I would say it's a warning sign. It could mean that the scope is being managed. So maybe they're not doing everything that they need to do. I don't know. The question that you should ask is, what would trigger the cost to change significantly from your estimate? A good lawyer will answer this clearly, and you will want to know, if my ex refuses to provide financial disclosure, what does that add to my legal fees? If we go to a hearing, what does that cost? But you will always have to budget for surprises because, as I said, in contested proceedings, the other party's conduct drives a significant portion of your legal costs. A strategy that minimizes unnecessary engagement is part of managing this, which brings us back to why knowing what you actually need matters before you go and do hiring. So most people choose a lawyer the way they choose a contractor, by reputation and recommendation. But you also wouldn't hire a specialist surgeon for a problem that a GP could fix, am I right? And you wouldn't hire a GP for a problem that needs surgery. So the question isn't who is the best family lawyer, it is what kind of legal problem do I actually have? Choosing a lawyer isn't about finding the most aggressive or the most expensive or even the person who came most recommended. It's about finding the right strategic partner for your specific conflict profile. And that means doing some honest work before you walk into any consultation, knowing what outcome you're trying to achieve, knowing what kind of conflict you're actually in, and knowing what your capacity is for a sustained process. When you arrive with that clarity, the first consultation stops being a performance assessment and starts being a genuine exercise in do we fit each other well. That is the difference between hiring someone and hiring the right someone. In the next episode, we're going to talk about what happens after you hire. Specifically, how do you prepare for your lawyer meetings so that every hour you pay actually moves your case forwards? If you have any questions, clarifications, want to know a little bit more, feel free to reach out via www.divorceatelier.com, the website. I'm Iman Ibrahim, and this is Divorce Actually.